So yes, I'm a bit of a new face, having just arrived back after 15 years, and so what I want to talk to you about today has quite a few details, but what I'd like it to be is to be a beginning of a conversation. So I've got quite a lot to cover, but feel free to come up and talk to me after or contact me and we can talk about these issues further. The future of batteries. ABRI's very much involved in that. We're a non-profit group of battery manufacturers, recyclers and environmental groups. And it's our vision to achieve battery stewardship in Australia. Our approach is very much one of a shared responsibility, and we do that through influence, advocacy, education and research. You can see we have a broad base of members, and it encompasses the whole life cycle of batteries, brands, recyclers, the whole works. And quite a few in the room today, so thank you very much for your support. So what does the future of batteries look like? It looks big, to tell you the truth. It's just such an incredible big part of our lives on a daily basis. If you just think about how that's changed over the past 10 years, it's significant. And it's getting more and more significant all the time. As we move into new energy sources, electric vehicles and so forth, it's definitely becoming bigger. And very important, actually, this is quite similar to Helen's theme in that we can't just be looking at the end of life. If we're really going to achieve battery stewardship, then we need to be looking at the whole life cycle of batteries. From production, where it's really important that we're labelling batteries so that we understand what the chemistries are involved and how we can dispose of them, through sale to control that, use, refurbishment, recycling, and then finally end of life. So we need to look at that as a whole system. We've covered already, I think, some of the key drivers for battery stewardship. One of the biggest ones is the impending avalanche of batteries entering the market, and I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. And this really does present a significant burden for local governments. They're the ones at the coalface really managing landfills and paying that price. But there's a whole range of other drivers as well around, product stewardship, ensuring that we're efficiently managing these resources. And one of the key drivers also is that we do have the technology. So what we're looking at is a little bit of a bottleneck, in a way, if you will. So we have a lot of equipment, and it's going to increase, and we have a lot of solutions as well. So what's holding that up? And that's what we want to really address, is how do we break that bottleneck? So just setting the scene a little bit, battery recovery rates at the moment. If we look at lead-acid batteries, we're doing an incredibly good job. We're recycling about 90% of those. If we look at handheld batteries, recently a report done by SRU indicated that we have about 17,500 handheld batteries sold annually at the moment. But the bad news on that front is that we're only recovering about 2.7% of that number, which is minuscule. And that is going to change enormously when we look at those numbers. Recent research indicates that for lithium-ion batteries in particular, which is one of the biggest, the increase is going to be upwards of 300% within 2 or 3 years, and rapidly increasing even after that. So this is where we are now, and that's where we're going. As we increase our reliance on batteries and battery-related products, the impact of that on the market is huge. So this is the avalanche of material that I was talking about. So what does that look like, that number? 187,000 tonnes. It's a number in your mind, but if you start to think about what it really is, I did the math, and it's around about the weight of the Opera House. So this is in the future what we're likely to be wasting in terms of volumes, and so that's something we really need to be addressing. So why is it not okay just to go on with that behaviour? We know the environmental impacts. We've talked about them already: loss of resources, the life cycle impacts, impact on greenhouse emissions. We also know the community impact. Batteries do, as we know, contain hazardous materials. There's also an upswing in button cell injuries as we use them more and more. ACCC estimates that there are about 5 button cell-related injuries in children attending emergency departments every week. So that's really significant. More and more we hear about fire in this sector. And it's also a burden on our infrastructure, landfills, all of those things. Export in terms of battery is also not terribly efficient, and so that has some significant impacts as well. So where does Australia sit internationally in the non-lead acid battery recycling world? It's not good. So what that means, though, is that we have an incredible opportunity for improvement, and so that's really where we want to be going with this. On the good news side of things, what we know also is that most Australians do want to recycle batteries. In fact, they're even prepared to pay a little bit for each one. Only about 10% of Australians wouldn't pay for recycling services. So this is an important project that came out of a work we collaborated with Planet Ark to do last year. Other things that we're working on in terms of achieving battery stewardship, we have a button cell project. So we're looking at prototypes that can come through the post. That's supported by Australia Post, KidSafe and the hearing care industry. So we're just trialling that in the market at the moment to see which prototypes and which mechanisms are going to be easiest in terms of channels to return them. We're also developing technical guidance so that people understand the safety issues around transport and packaging and that sort of thing. But there's a lot more action required. Australian efforts, I think Mike had a slide up in the circular economy session showing that batteries have been on the list for 4 years and yet we still don't have a program up and running. So there's definite room to move there. One of the things that the industry working group has done in the past year or two is to do a couple of trials to start to get an understanding of consumers' willingness to recycle, market share, levels of contamination that we can expect. So it's given us a good snapshot of what a good system might look like. We've also talked about the National Product Stewardship Act, and ABRI has been very involved in working in that realm as well. As you know, the Australian government has listed batteries as a priority product. It identifies products that do need action, so it's recognised that batteries are a significant issue in the community. And as a result of that, the government established the Battery Reference Group and an industry working group to facilitate a voluntary program. So over the past year, that group has come up with a financial options study, and some of the findings of that work is that shared responsibility is key, so having a cost-sharing model is essential to address free rider concerns, and that government has an important role to play here in terms of covering those free rider costs and ensuring that there's a level playing field for the brands. State and local governments also obviously have an important part to play as they're already providing a lot of these services, but there would be a need to expand collection infrastructure. Industry, brands and retailers would step up and be industry stewards and participate. On the retailer side of things, one good mechanism to use would be for retailers to agree to only sell brands that are participating in an accredited stewardship program, and would also contribute in kind to collection services. But some of the biggest challenges here is federal government commitment, so taking it to that next stage. So we've done an incredible amount of work in identifying what the issues are, what the possible models and step forwards are, but now is the time for action. And not just from the government, but also from the brands and the retailers to step up to this. So there's lots of examples of product stewardship cases in Australia. We have tyres, in which we're about to hear about. We have paint, we have mobile muster, there's the television computer scheme. What we're talking about here is actually not rocket science. There's also good battery examples, and the Call to Recycle program is one of those. The state of Vermont in the US is a really good example. So it's essentially prohibits battery producers from selling primary batteries in Vermont unless they participate in a program such as this. And as a result of that, Call to Recycle is set up as the PSO. The participants, the industry stewards as they're called, contribute an initial fund and then contribute based on their market share of sales in that particular area. And so this gives this program, in addition to the ones we have here in other product sectors, provide us with some really good information about how to move forward. And some of the key learnings that we've had both here and over there that we've been hearing about today is that consumer awareness and convenience are two absolutely critical pieces of this. So that's something we definitely need to focus on in terms of success. We definitely want to move through this picture and making sure that we're prepared for that big influx of material that's coming very quickly. We'd rather have this picture be a green opera house than a waste opera house. So in some ways what I'd like to talk about is a call to action, and on the federal government front, I think for me, just coming into this role, I've been learning rapidly what the issues are. And one thing I haven't got up here, which I do think is critically important based on the conversations that I've heard over the past few months, is that we need to have a more coordinated approach to this. It doesn't matter whether it's tyres, paint, everybody's on a learning curve to figure this out and how to make it happen. So if we can collaborate and work together to get a more consistent, holistic approach, I think we can make a lot more wins a lot more quickly. One of the things that we are calling for is some light regulation, so for government to actually ensure that brands and retailers get on board, and then they can either decide to run their own program or they can get on board with an accredited program and make it happen that way. Also, one of the key things that we've talked about in a number of sessions today is the need for centralised messaging. So that's obviously another key area where government can come into play. From a battery perspective too, we have some issues around export and making that process a little bit more efficient, so the federal government could definitely help there. But really, most importantly, it would be great if they would provide some leadership and direction, because one of the key things is how do we provide a level playing field. We've had a number of players in this arena who have been really engaged all the way along and suddenly aren't prepared to be engaged anymore because not all of their competitors are at the table. So their worry is that they'll put up the funding and get involved and it's going to lead to a disadvantage to them. So that's really where government can step in and make a big difference with very little effort. State government obviously also have an important part to play. So if there are any state government operators here, I think I would encourage you also to talk to the federal government about committing to that voluntary stewardship program so that we have that coordination at the national level. And also, obviously, there's a whole lot of things they can do in their own right and are doing in their own right in this regard. They can also get in touch with us so that we can coordinate efforts to communicate with the federal government. Local government at the front line, definitely, and footing the bill for this issue, and are going to foot the bill a lot more into the future too if we don't start to get this right. They have their own programs also, which they will continue to run. There's also more of a need for research. We've conducted a couple of trials, but it would be good to conduct more to have an understanding of the market share of different brands in this process. We need more new technologies. We have a number of members in ABRI who are really working on exciting new technologies, and that's really valuable, but we do need more as we identify mechanisms for managing this waste stream. So having options and testing different options and pilots is very important, and also harnessing best practice. Knowledge is power. The brands and retailers too, also very important that they show leadership here, getting involved in national efforts. If any of you are here today, then please come and talk to me afterwards how we can do that together. Corporate responsibility is obviously an important part for them, so having that kind of a structure in place is something that can be moved forward. Also, I think brands have a really important role to play in explaining why they think that the level playing field is so important, because without that the government probably won't commit. Organisations definitely have a lot of opportunities too, so every one of us in this room are probably part of an organisation, and we can take it on ourselves to take action here. Buy recyclable batteries, talk to your battery suppliers if you have large quantities, explain to them about how important it is that we have recovery of this, particularly if you're a big user of batteries. The ABRI website is a good resource if you want to get direct access to recyclers at a commercial level to talk about solutions. And also as individuals, we have an important part to play. So the Planet Arc website was mentioned. It is actually a really good resource, particularly for batteries. You just put in the material that you want to recycle and the solutions come back. There's also Exit Cycle in Queensland, which focuses on NiCad batteries. And also talk to your local retailers and encourage them to provide take-back programs. There are obviously some really good ones already. We're working with Bunnings in Victoria on the Battery Back program, but Helen mentioned IKEA, Battery World and Aldi also providing some good models. So the website there, recyclingeu.com.au, is a good one for your home-based problems or opportunities. So I think the future for real battery stewardship can happen quite quickly, but what it needs is the Bunsen burner that Carmel talked about. And only if we're all working together and making this a priority will that happen. Together we can improve safety, together we can reduce environmental impacts, and together we can have a vibrant recycling industry in Australia. Thank you.